Howdy, howdy. Welcome back to the Let's Get Oral podcast. I'm Jonathan Dornell, one of your co-hosts here at the LGO crew. And starting off in 2026, I am sitting here with Camille Zenobia, our other co-host and partner with the LGO crew. How are you doing, Camille?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. The year started off pretty wet and dynamic over here in the Bay, but we've had a nice few days of apprecious sunniness and cold. So I'm enjoying it. My dog's enjoying it, and looking forward to good vibes. How about yourself?
Oh, yeah. Well, we started out with lots of wind, but it has swept all the clouds away, and we're sitting with sun and cold temperatures, which is fine. As long as the sun is out, I'm a happy camper.
Exactly. And, sunny times, sunny vibes over here. And one thing I've particularly been grateful about this season, too, is knocking on wood now, not catching a cold. I don't know if you and your family have had as much luck, but as we know, it is cold season. It's officially been cold season for a while. And I think with the rebound from the pandemic, with travel and socializing and relaxing and maybe certain habits that might have been adopted during that time, the sniffles and coughs are prevalent.
Oh, they really are. And, I have kids in school, so that it's just a matter of when and not if. So, yeah, we definitely all had sniffles and some coughs during during late December. So they seem to clear up mostly before the actual holiday, but we definitely suffered a bit. I would say that, we've all seen in the news that this year is crazy high with all sorts of viruses happening. We have flu, COVID, norovirus, rotavirus, all in play right now to a large degree. And so I think everybody's feeling the impacts of this year. And I have to say that, when we take holiday, our oral hygiene specifically goes off the rails, because when people are at home, they just forget the routine and things kind of go by the wayside. And, we all like to sit in our jammies and be cozy and forget about toothbrushing while we're eating loads of cookies. I know I did. I mean, I didn't forget about hygiene because I'm a nerd like that, but I definitely ate too many cookies. So
Yeah,
I have my dry cookie January.
Yes, dry January is in full effect here too. Partially with not with any guilt, but the way I was off my routine,
right,
and healthy habits, in compromise of quality time and indulgence.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I do think this is an opportune time for us to dive a little bit both in like the one-on-one sides, but also a little bit under the surface of how and why the mouth is really an essential part of this health immunity discussion that we're having, right? Like, yes, we sneeze, we cough, we have skin as a barrier, we have supplements, we have all these things that play a role in immunity, but it seems to be neglected somehow once again when it comes to talking about the role of like our saliva, right? And the quality of saliva when it comes to immune health, or like the connection between bleeding gums when some brush or floss, and how that could be exacerbating chronic immunological conditions. So
exactly. Oh, you're speaking my language. Let's do this. Yeah. So why do we care about bleeding gums when the season of flu is upon us? Why do we care at all? What's the relationship there?
Right. And putting on, let's say, like my novice hat and playing this game with you, I would think anytime someone sees bleeding, whether it's in the mouth or someone else, that some barrier has been broken.
Exactly.
Like my part of my inside is now outside. That's not typically normal.
Exactly.
And so with that happening in the mouth, that suggests that either some insult, whether it was physical, mechanical from flossing or brushing, maybe I've bumped into the corner of the doorway walking outside, not highlighting a real experience of my past.
No, no. Yes, the clumsy cycle.
Right? If I, see reddish saliva or blood in my sink or on my brush, what is that really telling me beyond that insult, Camille?
I'm going to say this. When we're eating or drinking the world, or when we encounter new things, we don't maybe realize it, but all behavioral arrows point at making sure that we are touching and tasting the environment. So we put our fingers at our lips, at our nose, making sure that we're contaminating ourselves with what we're experiencing in the world. And it's no different with cold and viruses. The really cool part of the mouth and the nose is that it is the first like foray into our immunity that we get. And so as we're touching our face and exposing ourselves to viruses, our tissue is learning immediately what is happening in the environment, and that allows us to respond naturally. But if our barrier functions are compromised in any way, then we're going to have a different experience when our body is prepping to deal with the world. So I think to get a little deeper and nuanced into this issue, you could maybe start us off by talking about basic principles of immunity, and then we can start to talk about how they parlay into the oral cavity.
What is immunity? I think a lot of times when we discuss about immunity using like war language or whatnot, there's a bit of aggression, or dare I say
Definitely.
violence, that
Yeah.
is brought upon how we personify it. But I think it's important to recognize immunity is really like many things in life. It's about balance. And the
Yes.
way that balance is generally maintained in a healthy person throughout various stages of life are when the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system are working in tandem. The innate immune system is essentially really that like we talked about our tissues as a barrier. That's a part of it. But you also have underlying biological factors such as your white blood cells. So when you hear us talk about macrophages or neutrophils, these are some of the quote unquote soldiers that play a big role in that innate system that is able to react quickly and abruptly to an insult or ensuing potential infection.
Right. So the innate system would be like, what can I bring to the front line now, like within seconds, hours, maybe the first 2 days?
Exactly. And then we also have the adaptive immunity, which, as the name suggests, is more of like the strategy and management of a lot of those soldiers and how they play or interact with various sources or barriers like the teeth versus the gums and in other parts of the body. So when you put those two things together, that is what is essential for when that balance is in play, generally having healthy outcomes and reactions when dealing with immune related events, again, such as like flossing a bit too hard, maybe.
Right. Right. Well, okay. So, right, there's mechanical disruption, and then there's like ongoing chronic inflammatory disruption.
Exactly.
So the two are really. I'll just say this: that the adaptive immunity usually takes like 7 to 10 days to adapt to a new issue. So it does take a moment, and so we do rely on our innate immune system to like act before we think, basically, and that can mostly go well unless things are already wrong, or unless it's a too heavy hitter response. But this is where our mucosal tissues come into play when we arrive at an insult like flu or COVID or something. Our mucosal tissues are ready to go. That's what they're for. They're right there at the surface, ready to respond. And the way that we're set up is that we can create tolerance, meaning like that doesn't seem like a threat. I'm going to let that slide, or I'm going to react swiftly and with force.
And so I think this is a key part of that mechanism that plays between the innate and adapted sides of that system. And then when you throw in something like saliva or the microbiome, even, right?
Ooh, yes.
That adaptive arm of the immune system is really key of when functioning normally or as it's supposed to, being able to make adjustments to fine tuning its understanding of which bugs or factors in its local ecosystem are normal versus potentially threatening.
Right. Right. So, one of the things that I like to keep in mind is a healthy microbiome in the mouth is going to set the stage for tolerance to most things. But when we have a disorganized oral microbiome that is predicated on inflammation, then our immune response is going to be very, very different, and it's going to be a little bit either hard hitting or ignore the matter entirely. Either of which is a terrible idea. And so we need this like firm immune balance. But take us through some salivary qualities that might contribute as well.
So I think a big portion beyond the pH aspect of our saliva that plays a big role in immunity or is the presence of antimicrobial peptides.
Yes.
These, and you can imagine for those like me who don't have any issue with producing saliva, assuming I have quality saliva there, these peptides play a big role being able to disrupt either viral envelopes or particular biofactors that could be contributing to biofilm development on the teeth surface and also under the gums along the tooth surface. And they also can directly neutralize bugs that are just floating around in your saliva before they can become members of dental plaque or oral biofilm. And then the last part is like they also play a role from a signaling position when it comes to those white blood cells who could be on surveillance or on guard, but not necessarily activated to fight. So those peptides play a big role. And then in concert with them, you have enzymes, you have various secretory factors coming from the blood. And then you also have buffers that play a role of managing the pH. And altogether, those various factors are really essential for when you do have quality saliva, being part of that front line with the mouth as a barrier when it comes to immune health.
Right. So these antimicrobial peptides are actually produced by your skin cells. So these are the keratinized tissue that surrounds the tooth. Those are the ones producing antimicrobial peptides predominantly, although the neutrophils, some white blood cells in your mouth, are also involved. The neutrophils also produce enzymes, and all of this is let out into the saliva, basically, and this is how we get the mobility of these factors around the mouth. So
Mm,
if you have a low production of saliva, it's going to put you at risk because those factors aren't making their way around the mouth as efficiently.
wow.
And so the antimicrobial peptides are part of our innate immune system. And there are actually some of our good bugs that help produce them, help stimulate our gingival tissues to produce these antimicrobial peptides. It's a really cool relationship. But then there are other secretory factors like immunoglobulins. And these are things that we usually think of in terms of vaccines. So this has to do with our
Hmm.
adaptive immune response. And they are made by white blood cells and they are secreted into the oral cavity. They're called things like IgA, IgG, IgM. And these are things that help clear viruses and microbial members when they're out of regulation. So when there's too many, we know we need to turn up those secretory values to make sure that we're clearing responsibly. And so that's the adaptive part of our saliva coming into play in addition to those antimicrobial peptides. So all of that, it's very important to have saliva first and foremost, or to keep the mouth lubricated in some way. And we've talked about dry mouth before, and we've talked about chewing gum as being a nice helper in making sure
Hmm.
that you stay lubricated throughout the day. Although, you're trading that off with chewing full time, which is, a whole other discussion point, but just making sure that we're lubricated is important. And certainly there are products to help out there as well.
For those who've either experienced dry mouth or low saliva production, like I could see how that can correlate to a reduction in immune surveillance, right? And the role of that connection with saliva and having all these factors play a role from an
It
adaptive
does.
perspective. Is it possible for someone who does not like has the opposite issue of dry mouth, but they have high salivary flow and content? Is it possible for having too much of any of those factors to be detrimental?
That's a great question. And I don't know that we know the answer to that.
Mm.
Certainly, people who are well lubricated, extra saliva, people take all sorts of therapies to reduce saliva when they have excess, like they're a drooler and they don't want to be. So there are treatments you can explore for that issue. But I don't know that we have really fully explored the content of extra saliva and how it impacts the immune system. Certainly, there are papers showing, that there are those factors present in salivators.
Yeah,
But
drooling
as far
disease is
as
real.
it is. Yeah, it can be a real problem for some. But I think that on the whole, people who have more saliva often do better with their oral health.
Yeah,
So it's not usually a risk factor. It's the dry mouth that's at risk. And
more.
actually, we
Yeah,
see that in controlled situations where you're having to wear liners or something that prevents the saliva from getting equally spread throughout the mouth, and it puts you at risk for more cavities during that time that you're using the liners. It puts you at risk for a whole lot of other things like being sick more, for example. And this is why, is because it's part of your immune system.
yeah. And you also taught me something just now that when it comes to the AMPs, I was always under the impression that our white blood cells are the primary generator, but I didn't realize that it was the mucosa itself,
I mean, the
which
the
makes
neutrophil.
sense when you're thinking about it. But I just, for some reason, just put that task on our white blood cells as being like the key generators of that. But okay.
It's actually something that's common to all of our skin. So our entire
Mm-hmm.
outer skin also produces antimicrobial peptides. There is a very specific pattern in the gingival tissues, and the neutrophils do contribute to their own flavor of antimicrobial peptides, but there is certainly a gradation from the tooth moving away, this kind of graded pattern of different antimicrobial abundances. And I won't go into the nuance. There's a few papers that really are beautiful examples. I contributed to one review in this space, but I am very passionate around these very natural peptides that are, they not only basically drive antimicrobial protection, but they also modulate our immune system. So they have a complicated relationship, but they are multimodal, basically.
Wow, that's really cool. The human body.
I know it's really cool and complicated and not straightforward. It's never a yes, no. It's always a, well,
Could you tell us more about the gingiva and the mucosa, since we kind of naturally pivoted there, thinking of learning about its role in AMP production? Let's focus a bit more on its role as a barrier. Can we learn a little bit more about its composition and then how that translates into doing its job properly when it comes to dealing with either colds or other issues related to the mouth?
yes. Oh, yeah, I could do this all day. So in the in the gingival tissues, there's a whole bunch of different types of keratinocytes, but all try to be basic. Around the tooth, there's this really niche place called the junctional epithelial cells, and it's just like this 3 to 10 cell width of tissue that abuts the tooth. And this is where that kind of space between the enamel portion of your tooth and the unenameled portion, where the dentin are at play deeper under the gum line. And so this junctional epithelium is very porous, just in healthy tissues, it's very porous. And so, what happens at that very specialized place is the neutrophils are coming into these tissues full time, creating a wall. It's like they're soldiers all lined up, ready to prepare and defend the gingival tissue. And so we have neutrophils coming into our healthy tissues at like 40,000 neutrophils per minute. And when they're working in a functional way, they're basically having a conversation full time with the microbial members on our tooth there. And so they're the ones responsible for maintaining those barrier functions. It's no longer your keratinocytes alone, but in concert with our innate immune white blood cells. In the rest of the gingival tissue, they are different keratinocytes that have different expression patterns of these different antimicrobial peptides, but they're all very organized and, dare I say, predictable. But when we have inflammation in these tissue spaces, the neutrophils become more engaged and they start to release a lot more enzymes that basically contribute to tissue degradation. What the goal of those enzymes is to reduce the microbial communities, because the perception from the immune system is that there's too much happening, so they're trying to obliterate it. But in that moment, they're kind of causing damage to everything involved. And so this, I told you that the junctional epithelium is very porous. And so when the wall of neutrophils is compromised by activity, that porous tissue becomes very exposed. And if it happens for a long time, the whole keratinocyte population becomes disorganized, and you get the outgrowth of microbes that live in those deeper recessions where oxygen is low, and these anaerobic pathogenic bacteria thrive, and they don't have that wall of neutrophils to protect us anymore. And so this allows them to get into our vascular system. And this is when we see our systemic markers coming up. So systemic markers, inflammatory markers, like we're all aware of CRP, for example. This is something that comes up in heart risk patients, IL-6, MCP-1, but this also happens when we do experimental gingivitis. We see people who stop brushing for 21 days. The same thing happens. Their systemic factors, inflammatory factors, increase steadily over those 21 days. And then when you deploy hygiene again, those factors come down, thank God. So this is a really important piece where we know hygiene is very important to make sure that we're helping our neutrophils come back to an organized pattern of expression, if you will. But when we have porosity, open tissue at our gum line, this is going to put us at risk for not only going septic with our oral bacteria, but allowing anything in our environment to come in unregulated. And that's a problem because we need to teach our immune system how to deal with it first. And when we have a disorganized immune system at our gum line, then we're not going to be teaching them properly.
So if you're inhaling the droplets from coffer in seat 3.
Exactly. Well, okay. And then let's talk about while you're inflamed in the gums, your microbial community is shifting because now you have these deep pockets that aren't exposed to oxygen. These pathogenic microbial members that grow in too large of a number, we're not only swallowing them, which disrupts our gut microbes, but we're also inhaling them, which disrupts our lung microbiome. Yes, there's a lung microbiome. And all of these factors put our guts and lungs at risk as well.
Remember the good old days when it's easy to assume the brain and the lungs and all these other places in our bodies were sterile?
If only that were true. I know.
Now we have this microbiome thing.
It's messy. It's messy, but we're made to be messy and clean up. We're made to heal. And this is the important part that I want to come back to is that we have the tools. We have tools to help here. And we might have to, use many tools at once to get back under control. But, we're very resilient, these bodies of ours. So there's hope.
Right.
But certainly, if you already have lung issues or gut issues and your gums are out of control, then you're at a heightened risk overall. And
Okay.
I think that that's the thing that we should sit on, because that's where we can take care of at least one of the problems. We have access to our mouths and we can control the situation there.
Yeah. That it's one thing to highlight those who suffer from either gingivitis or some form of periodontitis. Are there other cold related risk factors or profiles of people who should be concerned when oral inflammation is already more active than it should be?
Well, certainly anybody with other issues. So if you have, this is something that I talk about all the time, is this two-hit model that Glogauer has done so beautifully in the lab and has taken it into humans with experimental gingivitis. But when you have two insults, like your gut's on fire and your gums are on fire, both of those different insults are going to be so much worse than just one of those alone. And so if you could just get one under control, it's going to help the other. So those people with risk factors like diabetes or heart health risks, if you can keep your gingival tissues under control, then your systemic issue is going to be more in control, even if you're still at risk. As long as you're taking care of one of those risks, you're going to be so much better off. But forever, dentists have talked about people with, asthmatics, COPD, lung issues are at heightened risk for pneumonia during colds and COVID. And these people we definitely saw on respirators during the COVID epidemic. And they were clearly at more risk. And we got to see real time that people with gingivitis and periodontal disease were at higher risk for catching COVID. And it was a really beautiful social experiment, unfortunately, where we got so many samples real time and we were able to evaluate people that had all of these risk factors, but periodontal disease, gingivitis were huge risk factors for people who ended up being hospitalized. And so if you could just control that one thing, your mouth, you could save yourself a possible hospitalization, which I think is huge.
Yeah. Crazy social experiment to say the least. But again, I think probably during that time, for especially those who stayed at home or stuck at home, how many of them had their oral care routine change accordingly? Because they're like, I don't have to see people for days. Maybe I
Exactly.
don't need to brush as much, or maybe this
Exactly.
change of breath is not all that bad. It's tolerable.
Yeah, one of the things that we saw in the data, running a toothbrush, a monitored toothbrush study with an app. So I got to
Hmm.
see real time people kind of slouch out, if you will, on their hygiene during the weekends, and it was just a natural thing. It wasn't everybody, but it was a lot of people. And I think that that's something that is not talked about a lot during the COVID pandemic. We're all stuck at home, and so because you're stuck at home, your routine's off. Are you brushing as much? Probably not. Probably we took a lot of liberties in those moments. I certainly didn't wash my hair as much as I usually do, for example. But those were really important pieces to talk about risk factors and hospitalization events. And I think that one of the things with experimental gingivitis that we've seen is those systemic factors come up during the experimental gingivitis over 21 days. It only takes 21 days of not brushing to become severely at risk, basically. And that's scary, right?
It really
So,
is.
yeah. And then to have the hygiene come back into play just after 1 week of hygiene, we see all of those systemic blood markers come down to normal levels. So just 1 week.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did want to pivot back to the oral lung axis and that
Yeah.
connection you mentioned, because I think that's also another aspect of oral immunity that somehow gets neglected when we at least talk about the role of the mouth and all
Yeah.
that. And this is where I think the hallway metaphor is very like very, very present, right? We breathe, we talk, we kiss, we do all the things with our mouth. But then we have this other factor being the oral microbiome and its role potentially like being able to signal outcomes when it comes to COVID or other respiratory issues. And also how inflammation can play a role underlying all of that.
Yeah, I think the inflammation is a huge issue because it's been shown that there are two ways to get to gingivitis and periodontal disease. One of them is the localized outgrowth of the microbiome, and as the outgrowth occurs, there's dysbiosis, dysregulation of those oral microbiome communities. But what that does is it signals to your tissues to create inflammation, of course, to get rid of them. But that inflammation doesn't stay local. We like to think that
Mm-hmm.
it does, but it goes systemic, and that's why you see all these blood markers come up during the progression of these pathologies. And what that does is it alters your systemic blood system so that it is more heightened to respond to issues. So when the blood comes back to feed your gingival tissues, it is feeding it more inflammation globally. So you're not, you're just, there's a chronic inflammatory opportunity there. If you don't get it handled right away, it just continues to grow, fester, if you will.
Yeah. Like that's the part of that cascade that really gives me pause with how much I sometimes will even over focus, say, on
Right.
understanding the microbiome aspect while not paying enough attention to the inflammatory profile of a person, or particularly in talking about myself here, and seeing how over time, um, if both are not being managed accordingly, how that cascade can really get off tracks that could then lead to me having maybe down the line more serious colds, more
Right.
serious
Exactly.
respiratory issues that I hopefully don't come across, but may happen. And I could be both myself and maybe even potentially my dentist could not be aware of those possibilities if we're missing both sides of the story.
Right, exactly. And they're only typically looking in the mouth, not always. Some dentists are looking deeper, asking better questions at the chair,
Mm-hmm.
but not everybody does that. And certainly the doctor as well. Some of the doctors I've seen ask me about my oral health, which I'm like, every time I'm just shocked. And I thank them specifically because I want to encourage that behavior. But one of the things we saw during COVID is that those who sustained the infection longer actually had more um, anaerobic bacteria on their tongue. And so this is again a space where it's not just in the tooth crevice anymore. It's on our tongue. It's easily swallowed, and it's going to enhance our susceptibility globally. So it's going to disrupt our gut microbiome, which puts us at risk for a whole lot of other things like metabolic syndrome. And we know that metabolic syndrome was a huge issue during the COVID epidemic. People with metabolic syndrome were usually hospitalized with a severe infection. And so these are things that we have to keep in mind moving forward. We have to get that microbiome under control. We have to get the inflammation under control. One of the things that I think we all see during hospital stays is a total disregard for oral hygiene. There's nobody to take care of. There's no specialist in the hospital typically to take care of your oral hygiene. And if you're laid up and you don't have access to your toothbrush, well, you can just say goodbye to that. So it's really
Mm-hmm.
horrific. And traditionally, we've relied on sponges with chlorhexidine, which unfortunately we found more recently that that also puts us at risk. And we have a
Yeah.
whole episode on that. So I won't get into it here, but having a loved one have access to you and bring your toothbrush and get you that opportunity back is such a huge deal. And we don't talk about that enough.
Wow. What can we do, whether it's at home or things related to our lifestyle, day to day habits, that could help mitigate or prevent this cascade from getting further?
I think everybody will hate me when I say flossing, but it does help. Um, and definitely brushing. And uh, one of the things that I definitely harp on is, if you have if you've already been struggling with your oral hygiene, sometimes changing products is important so you can discover a product that works for you. I think that's a huge deal. And we're still learning real time about new opportunities in this space. So I have my own product line, as we've discussed, but there are a lot of options out there. So just keep working with your healthcare provider and keep looking for something that is going to work for you. But all in all, I'd like to see somebody at least stable. Even if you have gingivitis and it's stable and it's not moving or progressing, it's, it's better than the alternative, and keep at it. And I mean, you can always message me. I'm ready to geek out with anybody. I have so many people just messaging me on the daily to see, what they could try next, and I'm happy to like play that game with you because it's I love a good detective story, right?
Exactly. As we were transitioning from 2025 to 2026, right, doing a lot of reflection, looking at things I pat myself on the back of, to be proud of, things that, are opportunities to improve upon, but again, not assessing them with shame or guilt. And I'd be curious if to hear if you have any oral health related goals for
Oh, that's a
2026.
that's a great question. Well, I have my own like personal weird story, and I'm happy to share that. I've written a lot about it recently, but I was recently diagnosed with a genetic issue, which interestingly puts my neutrophils into a chronic activation state. They're basically unregulated. There's no turn down switch, which I think is fascinating that I've been studying neutrophils all this time and just, of course, found this out recently. So now that I'm getting treatment, I'm wondering, if that's going to change what I use, how I navigate my oral health, because previously I was doing all the right things and I was still low level progressing. And when I founded my company, I basically founded it because I had found something that worked for me and that was, really effective because it controls the neutrophil activity, which is the main white blood cell in your mouth that regulates your immune system. So, yay, I started that and it stabilized everything, which thank goodness, because I had had enough of it. But I'm wondering now that I'm getting treatment for my issue if, I can, I don't know, get more experimental and see, what else I could do that might work too, because now I have some regulatory factors that I didn't have before. So that's kind of where I'm taking my own personal journey. How about you?
No, thank you for sharing that. Mine is actually twofold, like trying to, with intention, build a stronger relationship with my dentist slash oral care team here locally. But on the flip side, while doing that, like having us be both more accountable with how and where this relationship grows. And I think this is partially like when, for me at least, like when you get too deep into your own sauce of it, right? I'm not a dentist, I'm not that professional, but I understand more of my mouth than the average person might know about theirs, to the point where I'm like, oh, I can carry the heavy lifting for my oral hygiene plan and, trying out different products and whatnot. But I should probably do more to share with them more regularly. Like, hey, like during these 3 months, here's the probiotic tablet I was taking. Here's the toothpaste I was using. I decided to make a shift or change this product in this state for yada, yada, yada. Right. And having them become part of that journey, but also putting emphasis on them to help co-drive my, care over time. Because I think that is ultimately what will lead to long-term wins and maintenance in favor of me, but also hopefully for them as a practitioner. And so
Do you
that's
think
one of my
that you
goals.
will let them have the opportunity to microbial test you just out of curiosity and like in the name of science?
Yes, yeah, I would. Actually, last time I chatted with them about microbiome testing, they said they used to do it, but it's not something they regularly practice or involve in their practice these days for a variety of reasons. And I was like, I understood, but I still wanted to challenge them upon that because I see, I understand the skepticism, but again, also concede a value for various cases, right? And I think,
Yeah,
as you know, like the value grows with longitudinal surveillance and access and
right.
investigation.
Yeah, I
And
had,
so,
I mean,
yeah,
I know we both took the bristle test, and I don't think we've ever really shared our results, but I was pleased with my results. I didn't have anything, any real watchouts in mine, but I I wished I had had a previous examination before I had started my own oral care company,
right,
because I do want to know how that was altered. Incidentally, I also the hygienist who treats my dad called me without naming names. I didn't even know she was my dad's hygienist. She just called me to troubleshoot a patient who I later found out was my dad after everybody gave consent, and which I thought was a really hilarious opportunity to learn and grow with
right,
my dad. So cute. Anyway, he was having some issues and she was alarmed, and so she sent in a test. And anyway, looking at his test, he had been on my oral care products for a while, but even though he had microbial members that shouldn't be there and they were a little high, he didn't have Porphyromonas gingivalis, which I thought was really interesting because my technology really does eliminate or reduce significantly the neutrophil issue with which, when is out of control, Porphyromonas gingivalis specifically will grow crazy. And so I just thought that was like, wow, I can tell I'm having an impact here, which is just heartwarming. But interestingly, he started taking nitric oxide
mm,
in the lozenge form, and it was a game changer for him. So the two of those products combined, he is winning, which is great, and a real success story. So I mean, I hope he doesn't maintain his results with me, but I haven't had a call from his hygienist recently, so I'm hoping that they have
a
everything under control. The last thing I saw was good.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, I think those are good goals and good things to work towards. And actually, honestly, like once we finish this pod, I'm probably gonna call my dentist
My
and be like,
appointment's
"Hey,"
tomorrow, funny enough.
I'm like, "Hey, we need to continue that conversation."
Right, right.
Well, is there anything else you would like us to cover, at least for this first round of oral health and immunity?
I think we covered all the basics. I know it comes back to hygiene, which is like, uh, everybody gets abused by their dentist to like brush more, brush more, brush more. But I mean, the issue is really when you're brushing and flossing and you're not getting the correction that everybody expects. Then we need to have deeper and more complicated conversations. And I think that that's where I would urge all of you
Mm-hmm.
who are experiencing that issue to like start having nuanced conversations, push for it, really like I'm interested in dealing with this, but obviously what we're doing isn't working, so like what else could we do that's different and new that might help? And those are the conversations that I think become more meaningful. Certainly, when we have ongoing inflammation anywhere, we should be concerned. And when your immune system is turned on for too long, it's just not good all over. It puts us at risk for so many things. So I think that's my take home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely can continue deeper discussions about specific, I guess, associations, correlations, and the research behind gingivitis or perio or just oral inflammation to other respiratory diseases. We could talk about the microbiome in more
Right.
detail.
Right.
So and then also I think it'd be great for getting some either clinicians or people who've actually experienced what we've been talking about to share their stories.
Well, call out to Marcelo, who
Mm-hmm.
works in Southern California. He has been an oral neutrophil person for many, many years also. And he's a clinician, dentist by trade. And he has some very compelling COVID research. He's been in it since the pandemic arrived, really doing some great work. So maybe I could appeal to him to be on the show for a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, until next time, thank you again, Camille.
Always happy to hang out with you coast to coast.
Yeah, this is a blast. And until next time, we'll see y'all later.